It is Monday, February 26, 2018 at 1 o'clock Eastern Time, and this is Admissions Live. I'm your host, Adam Castro, and on today's live broadcast, we'll be figuring out what accepted students want. My guests today are Amber Sandel, Jeremy Tiers, and Jay Murray. Admissions Live is part of the Higher Ed Live network. Our episodes offer you direct access to the best and brightest minds in education. Be part of our live broadcast by sharing your knowledge. Participate in today's discussion by tweeting us using hashtag HigherEdLive. All of our episodes are free and easy to access in the video archives at higheredlive.com, or take Higher Ed Live with you on the go by subscribing to the podcast. Higher Ed Live is produced by M. Stoner, a digital-first agency committed to tailored solutions that drive real results. We know you've wondered what prospective teens are thinking when they receive and read or ignore your institution's recruitment marketing. In partnership with NRCCUA, the myth-busting enrollment marketing research uncovers the best marketing channels and communication preferences that have the biggest influence on prospective teens' perception of your institution. Early release signups end this afternoon. Don't miss your chance to sign up and receive early access to the research results and white paper releasing this week. Admissions Live is sponsored by NRCCUA. Recently, NRCCUA's research division, EduVentures, published their annual in-depth report of their survey of admitted students. This one-of-a-kind study leverages EduVentures' proprietary data set to analyze and provide actionable insights on the key influencers of students who have admitted to and are now choosing their best fit school. NRCCUA members have the opportunity to participate in this annual study, leveraging their own admitted student pool, enabling them to compare the results of their admit database with the responses from EduVentures' national sample. All of these results are available on demand in the Ancora Data Lab platform. We will be tweeting out a link to the webinar EduVentures hosted last week, summarizing the key findings as well as a recent overview published by the Chronicle of Higher Ed. To learn more, visit ancora.org. Okay, well, let's jump right in, guys. Thank you so much for joining me on Higher Ed Live today. It is a timely topic that we're discussing today, and that's everything accepted students and yield. And I'm really happy to have you guys on. Why don't we start off with some introductions? Amber, why don't you kick us off?
Sure. I'm Amber Sandel, a social listening analyst with Campus Sonar. I've worked in marketing for several years in both an agency and an in-house capacity at Great Lakes, a student loan servicer. I joined Campus Sonar, which is a social listening agency for colleges and universities, when we launched last October. In my free time, I enjoy reading a lot and hiking.
Great. And Amber was highly recommended to me by Dr. Liz Gross, who needs no introduction. Who had me at the fact that she says, Amber's been listening to accepted students online for months, and she'll have a lot to say. So welcome, Amber. Happy to have you. Jay, please introduce yourself.
Hi, everyone. I'm Jay Murray, the Associate Vice President for Enrollment Services at Western Connecticut State University. I've been in higher ed now for about 26 years. This is my fourth institution. I've been at Western this is my 5-year anniversary is actually coming up on Thursday. And since there, I'm in charge of admissions, advising, financial aid, graduate, publication design, and the enrollment services office. And we're a regional comprehensive public of about 5,000 students.
Awesome, Jay. Very happy to have you on. It's been a long time. Jay and I go back to our early days in admissions, and it's great to have you on Higher Ed Live. Jeremy.
Thank you.
Hi, everybody. My name is Jeremy Tiers, and I am the Director of Admissions Services for a company in higher ed called Tutor Collegiate Strategies. And we do two big things with colleges and universities. We help admission staffs with staff training, all the things that are time consuming and very, very important and sometimes don't get enough attention. And then we also work with schools on their communication flow. But we do it a little bit differently. And the key is just establishing a relationship, obviously, between the admission staff and students and parents throughout the process. And we found that help students when it comes time to make a decision, and it's another factor that affects yield. So, but I've been doing this now for 4 years. I love it. I do a lot of travel, not as much as Liz, but I'm pretty close. And so just excited to be here today and obviously be a part of this conversation.
Yeah, and I've had Jeremy to my campus. I follow Jeremy on social media. He's prolific, to say the least. And I consider him one of the hardest working people in higher education today. So welcome, Jeremy. Glad to have you back on the show. Let's stick with you, Jeremy. A little bit of a rapid fire here. in a sentence or two maximum, what do you think accepted students want?
They want to make sure that they've made the right decision, and they want to figure out how they're going to fit in on your campus.
Easy enough. Jay, what do you think?
Mirror what Jeremy said. I think definitely they want to the right decision. They want to know they fit, but they want to make connections. Students, you're really starting the retention phase, and they got to know that they've made the right fit, and there are people there that they're going to identify with, and they're going to be happy. And they also, I think, want that personalized attention and follow up for the student from the university. You know me, I've applied, you know what I want to study. Talk to me as an individual, not as a mass of the 3,000 other students you've admitted.
All right, that was way more than two sentences. We're going to let you fly. You're excited. I get it. The show is exciting. It's yield season, all those beautiful things. Amber, how about you?
Sure. Actually echoing what Jay said, I had two words, short and sweet: personalization and connection. That's what we're seeing online. Admitted students want to hear from the college, university, and they want to connect with you guys. Make it personal.
Awesome. I think we're going to talk a lot about that and a lot about connecting, building relationships today. Amber, your background is fascinating, and what Campus Sonar does is fascinating as well. That's why I'm so glad to have you on this panel, because I think you bring a certain level of knowledge that maybe we on campuses don't really get to see every single day. So tell us a little bit about how students are behaving online, but maybe start with a little bit of a background about what social listening is.
Sure. I think the easiest way to explain it is that it's a version of online market research. So as a social listening analyst, I'm able to search for relevant conversations around the internet, from social media, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, news websites, review websites, etc., and study those conversations for trends. So a relevant example for today's audience is that through social listening, I've been able to capture conversations that admitted students are having on social media. So this has allowed Campus Sonar and our clients to engage more personally with admitted students online and then potentially influence their final college decision.
Awesome. So speaking of someone that's still learning social, I always thought that by going into Twitter and typing in my institution in the search and then finding out what people are saying, that was doing my research and doing what I needed to be doing. But that's kind of like just the tip of the iceberg, right?
Yeah, it really is. And that's a great step. I mean, colleges and universities should be doing that stuff. It really helps guide some of those strategic on-campus decisions that you guys are making. Beyond that, and what we do at Campus Sonar is we're able to leverage some software and then leverage some of our marketing and higher education expertise to go in and kind of dig a little bit deeper. So for example, we can go in and we can find those mentions in those conversations that students are having when they may not actually use a campus hashtag, when they may not tweet at your campus account. I can go in and find that stuff. So I think that's just one more step where we can find those hidden conversations and bring them to light, and then hopefully get those students to your institution.
And this is still a relatively new strategy, right? I mean, I think there's still a lot of colleges and universities that have no idea that this is an option for them.
Right. And it's a huge opportunity, I think, because it is so new that there's so much that we can do in this area. To be honest, the thing about social listening is that it's a lot more flexible than traditional research methods. So in terms of the information that you're getting back, it's a lot lower cost than doing a survey or a focus group. Instead, you can go online and you can kind of figure out what students are saying that they may not tell a higher education professional. They may not be comfortable, but for some reason, students are okay telling the internet. So being able to go online and capture those conversations in aggregate and find patterns and trends, and then bring that back and say, okay, here's what this group of students wants, say admitted students, and then being able to leverage those insights and then make strategic decisions from them.
That's what I find fascinating, is this idea that you can gather this information and without even talking to a student directly, start making decisions that could drive yield strategy, recruitment strategy, and the like. It's a fascinating thing. We're going to get back to all of that, and I can't wait to dive into that a little bit deeper. But Jeremy, I want to go to you because you are the comm plan master. I mean, this is one of the things that you do, is help institutions build out effective communication strategies. So if you had only two means in which to communicate with accepted students, whether it be mail, snail mail, email, phone, what would those two things be?
So I would say, Adam, the two would be email and it would be phone, and I'll just quickly elaborate for you. We've done some survey research, not only through Tutor Collegiate Strategies, but College Week Live, which is another higher ed entity I'm sure a lot of your listeners are familiar with. And we've actually asked them, hey, after the accepted student stage and you get your admittance letter, what is the best way to communicate with you if I'm a college? And email is by far and away number one. Part of me, quite honestly, thinks students default to that anyways, because it's what they know. But the other thing I would tell you is email is quick, obviously. It allows just quick response time and, you know, little things to get across, I think, versus a long letter, which obviously is much more time intensive and obviously costs a lot more in postage for colleges. And then phone, because I think phone is voice, and voice right now is just huge for us in a society in general. I'm actually presenting at a NACAC conference about this week and the value of phone calls, because students continue to tell us they are extremely valuable, especially after the admitted stage, not only before, but also after, just because you're able to sense things like tone and able to ask questions versus going back and forth on a long thread, for example, on text messaging.
I always said if an accepted student picks up the phone, you're already halfway home. You know what I mean? They're interested if they're picking up that phone when they see that phone number come up in their phone. Jay, would you add or change anything that that Jeremy said?
Yeah, I think that's the interesting thing. As the funnel starts to shrink, when we get to the accepted student stage, we find that our ability to connect with the students, and I mean that by them responding to us, goes up astronomically from what it was at the inquiry and then the applicant stage. So we will do text messaging once they get to the admit stage. Certainly we'll continue with email, but we do not leave out snail mail in our communication, because we find as a regional public dealing with first-gen students, getting the parents involved. So whenever we can capture the parents' information, whether it be the cell phone or their email, or certainly just mailing stuff to the household, I think that really helps us connect with the family. Interesting scenario happened. We sent out our first round of financial aid packages on February 14th. And we had a mother call in, which is the best thing when you send your packages out and you get an immediate response. That's huge. And the mother was amazed that, this is the first time she's hearing her son was admitted, was getting financial aid packages. She was pumped up about it. But the scary thing about that is we had sent him 5 communications previously, and the son had not only ignored them all, but didn't tell his parents. So it shows that, you need to keep following up the communication, because this is his top choice, although he wasn't communicating in response to us. But the moment we got the parent engaged, that was a big deal for us.
Yeah, sometimes volume works. Just keep sending stuff. Eventually it'll get through. Amber, so I mean, for you, I don't know if you might be biased, but I mean, does social play a role, and particularly in maybe a top 2 way to communicate with students?
Yeah, I was going to say ahead of time, I'm probably going to sound like a broken record because social. It is. I think from what the research that I've done in terms of what admitted students are saying online, going back to that idea of connection and celebrating, really. I mean, being able to celebrate with a student their acceptance to your institution is huge. So hopefully more colleges and universities are going online, because I think, thinking back to what Jeremy was saying about phone and email being sort of what they expect, maybe social media is kind of this uncharted territory, but there is potentially a lot of opportunity there for institutions to connect better with admitted students. So that being said, you can go and you can celebrate with them. You can say, oh, hey, and congratulations, like this is awesome. And you have another touch point through that funnel to get them on campus.
So I think a lot of schools, and I certainly wrestle with this, even though I'm much more liberal now than maybe I used to be with this strategy. But if a student goes on social media, let's say they go on Twitter and they, put their acceptance certificate up there, and they're excited to be admitted to Bloomfield College, for instance, but they don't tag the institution specifically. But you find them through different means, whether it was retweeted by someone that you follow, or you do it through a search. Can you still engage with that? And should you still engage with that student about that acceptance and congratulate them and the like?
Yeah, That's a great question. I was actually just talking to a colleague about this, and we were kind of wrestling with that exact, is it too creepy? If you just found them, or should you go ahead and celebrate? And kind of where we ended up is that, again, it's a happy emotion, right? And it's a good thing. So I would say test it out. I mean, I'm not going to tell you like go out and do it, but I would say test it and kind of gauge what that reaction is. But my gut feeling kind of is that it's going to be well received because it is celebrating with the student. On the flip side, if they had some sort of customer service issue or were complaining, that may not be as well received on top of, whatever complaint that they have, oh my God, and you're also creeping on me on social media, like that kind of a thing. So, yeah, I would say go ahead and test it out. I think that, celebrating with them, their minutes might be a little bit more well received.
Yeah, I mean, we've been doing that much more recently, and it's been all positive.
Great. Yeah.
So far. So we'll see how that goes. Jeremy, I want to go back to you because, again, talking about ComFlow a little bit here, in terms of best practices and how we should be talking to admitted students, let's say before submitting a deposit, what are some things that institutions need to know about how students want to be communicated with?
Sure. Yeah. And I was just going to tie in to what, both of our other guests just talked about, because I think they're spot on with everything. Jay hit on something in particular. I think a good com plan, whatever you want to call it, from start to finish, from the moment they enter your funnel to the day they walk on your campus, it's a little bit of everything. Obviously, different schools, different budgets. I totally get it. But I would argue there's value from start to finish in mail, email, phone, texting, and social, 100%. Now, having said that, I also know, as I'm sure everybody else does out there, different students, different preferences. While they default to saying email is their preferred method of communication, I know, for example, because we have a whole separate division of our company that deals with student athletes, and my boss, Dan Tudor, does the same thing, but he does it with college athletic departments. Student athletes, for example, if you're a small private liberal arts college, you're a Division III in athletics, so you don't offer scholarships per se, they're much more open to texting for some reason. Student athletes are way earlier in the process, especially from coaches. That's a proven fact. I also know that there are some, like Amber said, who are very creeped out. And literally, when we ask about texting in surveys, they literally verbatim say, don't do that. That's creepy. But some are like, absolutely, I wish you would do it more. So I think both texting and social media are what's coming. But I would argue that right now, if you had to choose two, I think for convenience sake for an institution and for delivering the way students want to be delivered to, I would tell you email and phone. Having said that, Adam, to go back to your other question about how often to be communicating, I would say before the accepted stage or the admitted stage, what students continue to tell us and all the research we do is about every 7 to 10 days, they want some type of contact from a college or university. That could be a letter. That could be an email. That could be a text message. That could be a phone call. You're at their school for an event. They're in your area and they're on campus. Whatever it is, they tell us, right or wrong, if they don't hear from a college every week, week and a half, they start to get a little, does that mean they don't like me? They're not telling me I can't get in. Totally irrational behavior, right? But again, sometimes that's what you're dealing with when you're a college or a university working with teenagers. So where we see it change after the admitted stage is, I think you can go much more heavy on the email, like I said earlier. And while I agree with Jay that there's value, especially on the parent side, like for example, in our ComFlows for committed students, as we call them, we still have that our clients send the parents once a month a hard piece of mail. And that hard piece of mail loops them into the conversations that have been happening between the admissions counselor and their child over the last month. And obviously keeps the engagement going back and forth and opens up opportunities for them to ask questions and make sure that as parents, they feel like they're a valued partner, because that's what we want our clients to make sure that the parents are feeling like. So I would argue that you can go a little bit more on email, but I definitely think there's value after they're committed or accepted to doing mail. And I would argue that 7 to 10, Adam, we found can be stretched maybe a little more to about every couple of weeks. So instead of doing, for example, 3 pieces of communication a month, maybe you're only doing 2, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, it definitely makes sense. And we've tried to stick to that 7 to 10 day rule as well, and really interjecting, personal phone outreach is probably the most difficult thing to do in that. And so one of the things that struck me when you were talking was email is so great because it's so easy, it's so easily tracked, whether they opened it or not, whether they engage with it or not. But one of the things that we see is a much higher level of engagement, meaning a reply and a conversation coming out of text messaging. And I know, Jay, text message is something that you're really interested in on. So can you tell us a little bit about your experience and how you're leveraging that medium to communicate with students?
So, ever since we went live with our current CRM, so we're a TargetX school. And so we've been really happy with the CRM because it allows us to check the open rates on their email, on the text messaging, and it all lives right in the student's record. So what we're doing is we're looking at how the students are responding, which messages are yielding, as far as our success, and that's kind of been really adapting. And like Jeremy says, we really ramp up that communication after the admit stage. I mean, I think we're probably, one of my staff members who's been at Western for a while had said, we've never harassed people as much as we do now. But I always have this feeling, it's like continue communicating until they say stop. And it's very interesting when we text message students, we're getting very few stops or leave me alone. It's clear that they're desirous of getting the information. Very much so with the email as well. We're not seeing people say no until we get closer to May 1. So my philosophy is, well, let's keep getting the information, make it information that they can consume. Back to the social media, we're using TargetX. We're also on their schools app platform, which is kind of this closed admitted student social media experience. And we invite our students from the admit stage into it because we want them to connect with each other. But also, since it does require them to download an app, which I know is a no-no now, but very interesting, the further they go along the cycle, they are raising their hands, they're getting the information, and it's allowing us to push notifications to them. And again, it's tracked right in the CRM, so we know, not just from email, not just from text messaging, but also then from our schools app interaction with the students, what's going on. And this is very, very powerful information that we use, certainly not just for the coming cycle, but that data then stays in the CRM, and we use it for analytics for the coming year as well.
And now I just can't stop thinking about Amber hacking into your closed social media group to see what the students are saying. That's not possible, right?
It's not possible. I was like, oh God, no, we only use publicly available information.
Gotcha.
So
yes. We heard Amber was out there,
group.
so that's why we made it closed.
Yeah. No, it makes sense.
But going off of that, though, I mean, I think that's one thing that students are looking for. The idea of some sort of digital experience, right? And we talk about the future is social media, and it's online, it's email, and whatever version of that looks like, kind of preparing, having a higher education institution preparing yourself for that future. One of the biggest challenges I think that I see, at least with our clients, is that their online reputation, it's hard to handle. There's so much. One week it's Facebook, the next week it's Twitter, Instagram, then this other new thing. But really kind of scaling that back and focusing on the core, maybe those 3 channels, and having your house all in order, right? So a lot of times we see colleges and universities with 20 to 50 different Facebook pages or Twitter accounts. And what does that mean for the admitted student? It means that ultimately they may not know which account they need to go on and tag you in. They may not know which hashtag to use. There's a ton of confusion over, especially athletics hashtags. They'll go on and they'll use, go whatever the mascot is, or go team. And, maybe that's not necessarily effective because it's not celebrating the academic side of things. So just, again, an interesting note to say, having that all in order, having that foundation built, having your online reputation kind of ready to go is going to set you up for success in the long run when students are ready to fully transition to being connected with on social media.
So would your recommendation be really just have an institution say, this is what we're going with? We're going with the institutional handle, whether it be Instagram, Twitter, and everything that we're going to send out, prospective students are going to have this, and we're going to use these 3 hashtags, and we're not going to go beyond that. I mean, are these conversations that colleges need to have before they start admitting students, so everybody's on the same page?
I think so. I'm not sure operationally what that would look like on your end, but I think from a strategic social media perspective, it would make sense even in that acceptance letter, not necessarily that, these are the only 3 accounts that an admitted student can interact with, but have that recommendation out there saying, hey, you want to celebrate your admittance, go on to our Facebook page and post something with a specific hashtag. And I think that's not only going to help colleges and universities on the back end track what admitted students are talking about in terms of their admittance, but it's going to help them celebrate their admittance and also feel like they're part of something bigger because they're using that admitted hashtag and they're talking to the school and hopefully at some point to other admitted students who are posting about the similar things.
Yeah,
Jay, I would add
something to that.
Yeah, we went out with the hashtag I chose WCSU so that we can track it, but also in Schools app, because the students were a little shy at first, just like Amber said there, is it Facebook, is it Snapchat, is it Twitter, is it Instagram? So we're kind of using that as our organic communication to our students, and then we want to migrate them to the Schools app. We do surveys and competitions and incentivize. So we paired our Schools app with our Accepted Student Day last year because I wanted to get that activity and get those students connected together. So we did a selfie with Chuck. Chuck's our mascot, and if you had to come to Accepted Student Day, you had to take a selfie with Chuck. You had to post it on Schools app with I chose WCSU. Our connectivity with our students skyrocketed on that one day. And we actually had students then calling because they needed to find their Schools app invite in their inbox. They needed to be resent because they were so excited to connect with the students. And that's when we started to really notice that we really had created something that the students wanted and was able to track our ability. And that's one of the things we love about Schools app is we can really see what the students are talking about, the questions. They might go there and they might go off to GroupMe or something else, but they always seem to revert there to get their school-specific information. So we're able to continue to push content, remind them of the deposit reminder, but also orientation, when's your housing assignment coming up? So it really keeps them engaged. And as I said before, we kind of bridge that into a retention standpoint. So we know if the students are connecting with each other there, they're more likely to enroll. And certainly once they get on campus, the more friends they've met before they start at the university, the more likely they are to stay.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that's beautifully put. I think what we're talking about kind of almost always boils down to relationship building and fit, and those being such powerful factors when someone's trying to decide where to spend the next 4, 5, 6 years of their life. I want to reference something that I said in the opening, which is a EduVentures report done by Kim Reed recently, and it was just written up on the 13th. In the Chronicle of Higher Education, and then we tweeted out a link earlier. I recommend everybody take a look at that. But in that report, Kim identified 7 key decision segments that students are really using when deciding on which college. I want to go through them quickly. 1, affordability, availability of desired program, reputation, job opportunities, value of education for cost, feeling of fit, and proximity to home. And one of the things I thought was really interesting is 80% of the 100,000 students that were surveyed fell into one of those 7 buckets. So there's not a whole lot of room outside of those 7 where students are going to fall in. And I want to really hone in on the fit angle because I think that the admission counselor is kind of getting lost in the shuffle here as we move to more social, as we move to more automated communication. Large scale accepted student day events. I still think that the admission counselor can be very powerful in the decision making process. So Jeremy, I want to talk to you about, what are some unique ways admission counselors can build relationships with their accept pools?
Sure. And I would just tie back in, Adam, before I answer that, to what everybody else said. I think a key portion of, or a key part of the comm flow and how you make it work at all these stages, quite honestly, is the who. And by that, I mean, whose name is on all these comms, these emails, these letters, who's making those phone calls? And what I continue to find in talking with a lot of, EM and admissions leaders, Adam, is it's a bunch of different people. And we talk about the importance of connections. Both Amber and Jay have touched on them today. I agree, massively, massively important. How are you giving a opportunity for each of these students, not only to make multiple connections, but from a comm standpoint, to know whenever I have a question or whenever I want to ask something or my parents want to ask something, I don't have to guess between 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, or 10 different people who I've gotten various stuff from throughout the year. I know, tying in with what you were just saying, Adam, my admissions counselor is my go-to person, as I like to call it. And that's why I would argue, and this is why we have our clients do it this way, from day one, when you start sending emails and letters, when they enter your funnel, I think it should be the admissions counselor's name on it, not somebody in a position of leadership like Jay, not somebody in a position of leadership like you, Adam. And I now have data to back that up because we've started asking it on surveys. Hey, students, when you get that first piece of college mail, whose name do you want to see on it? And we gave them 2 options: admissions counselor, director of admissions. It's been above 80% on every single survey we've done where they answer admissions counselor. And I think part of that is they assume, right or wrong, because I know both of you are very, very good leaders, that you guys don't have time and you have so much other stuff on their plate. It's not realistic for them to think they can develop a relationship with Adam or Jay. But if Jeremy is an admissions counselor, it's much more possible that Jeremy and Plausible will take time to get back to that student or get back to that family and obviously be able to help them, whether it's answering a question, connect them with somebody or what have you. So I think that's just an important part I wanted to throw in there. And then tying into the survey you mentioned, Adam, the one that we've seen, because we do a very similar type survey, not as in-depth in terms of the amount of students we've been able to capture, but we've been doing it for about 4 years consistently. And 10, 15,000 different names over that time. What we've found is that relationship with an admissions counselor, if it's done correctly throughout the entire process, absolutely influences that decision in a positive way, to the point where we have 16 factors on that survey, and it's affordability, it's location, it's all the things you mentioned, which I agree are all important and usually are all high on our survey. But how the admission staff treats that student throughout the process, students tell us when it comes time to make decision, that's a top 2 or 3 for them every single time. I've never seen it on a survey we've done where it's been below a top 3. And it's typically ahead of affordability, and it's typically ahead of location. Because again, I think that's another way for your school to stand out, not only from a customer service standpoint, but just, again, it's that connection. It's that I know that I can depend on person A from school A, and that's going to help take away that fear we talked about back at the start of fitting in or of have I made the right decision. Does that make sense?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I think you said a ton of great stuff there, and I want to make sure people understand, where you're coming from, because I completely agree. And we've done some, ABC testing, particularly with emails, to see, where open rates and interact rates are doing the best. And we found, if I send something, it's crickets, right? But if an admission counselor says something, you start getting some interactivity. But if a student sends something, you even get more activity. And you can tell, there's a hierarchy there in terms of approachability online. And certainly, student-to-student interaction is going to be, much more comfortable, for a 17-year-old prospective college student than maybe, working directly with the vice president or dean or even director of admissions. So I completely get that. And I guarantee most institutions are doing that wrong. It took us a long time, and thankfully one of your visits to campus to really start changing the way we communicated with students to them, because I always thought get the title out there, that carries some weight, and maybe it still carries weight with parents, but I completely agree that students want to hear from admission counselors, and I think other students.
Well,
Jay,
it's the fear factor too, Adam. I would just say quickly.
What's that?
Not to interrupt, but I would say it's the fear factor quickly too that ties in with that. Why, again, the comfort levels there more with an admissions counselor and a student versus somebody in a position of leadership.
Absolutely. Jay, what are you guys doing on your campus in terms of, really getting those admission counselors to engage with their accept goals?
This is something I think that was lacking when I first arrived. It was, we used to try to do the phone calling, but it was too late. I mean, there was no relationship had been built, and that's key. You can't just pick up the phone in April and expect results. It's a counselor who's communicated with the student through the inquiry process, met them on the road at their high school, shepherd them through the application process, then is following up later on, whether it be email, whether it be phone, or whether on campus, inviting them to campus for a shadow day or an accepted student day or just a regular campus tour. Those are the folks that we have an exceptional amount of success with. It's personalizing because, back to that data, affordability is definitely one for us. We know this hands down that Western, our price point and our financial aid are the big driver. However, that's only not getting you to fill the class. It's standing out from the crowd and that personal attention, that student with the fit. Do they like how they're treated? Do they like how they're responded? Do they feel comfortable on campus? But also, do they feel they've made a connection, not just with other students, but with the staff? So that's something I've been aggressively trying to add to the process.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that could be a giant hole in a strategy. I mean, I always say a good admission counselor is fantastic and they can do a lot of good, but a bad admission counselor can do just as much bad in terms of trying to seat your class. So that's incredibly important. I did want to move on.
It's one thing on that, Adam, that you
Sure.
said, and not all admissions counselors are good at it. It is a gift. You cannot teach people how to connect. I mean, I have one guy in our office, and he's been around for a while, but his ability to connect with students and parents is really legendary, no matter who they are.
Nice. Yeah, I know. I completely agree. Let's talk a little bit more about social, because every time around this time each year, there's going to be an article in a higher ed publication talking about our colleges and universities checking students' social media accounts before they make a decision. And just to clear this up for everybody, no, nobody has that kind of time to check social media accounts unless that is your sole job, which I just feel it's incredible for that school that can have the resources to hire the person that does the background checking of their applicants on social media. But it does bring up a good point in terms of, can we use social media as a primary communication source when all other things fail? If student is not responding to mail, if students are not opening emails, if they're not responding to text, if you have a bad phone number, can you use social media, or is that way too creepy to really lead with in terms of the first time speaking with a student? Amber, you're certainly the one to speak about that.
That's a really interesting question. I mean, I think if all else fails, it may not hurt because they haven't responded to anything else. Again, I'm going to put this disclaimer with everything like something you want to test out. However, I wonder if your institutions, or if you've heard of people testing asking for student social handles ahead of time, like on the application, in terms of a possible manner that they'd want to be communicated by social. So have any of you done that? Is that something that would be in the realm of realistic possibilities?
We don't ask for handles right now.
Okay.
We don't ask for handles either.
And I was going to say, I can add, Amber, that we've actually done some research. When we go and do a workshop at a school like Adams, we'll actually ask on surveys, hey, how often throughout this college search process, students, did you want to be contacted in each of the main forms? And one of which is social. And it's amazing. We've added an actual never category now. We only added it about a year ago when one of our clients said, hey, I wonder if they never wanted an email, a phone call. Can we add that? And I said, sure, let's see what happens. The number that say they never wanted a college to contact them via social at any point throughout the process is higher than any number that didn't want a text, didn't want a phone call. So I would argue that, and you made a great point at the start, I think social is what's coming. I just don't think it's being used the way that students want it used by colleges right now. So I don't think they're comfortable with it. That's what they do with their friends. But I think when a college figures out how to take and harness social and use it the way and not overthink it, which I think a lot of schools do, I think it's going to be massively, massively a game changer.
Yeah. Yay, data. So thank you. Super helpful. Yeah, it's interesting when you put it all together then kind of what that means, because in terms of, well, I guess what I keep going back to is this idea of online reputation and your brand, really. So if a student can go online, and if this is the future, in some capacity. If a student can go online and understand if a college is the right fit for them, which we talked a little bit about before, just by looking at your website, your athletics site, your Facebook, your Twitter, your Instagram, I mean, that would be awesome, because then at that point, then they'd be able to opt in and be able to connect with you online. So hopefully at some point that would be a great way to test then how well they enjoy communicating with a school or a university online as well.
Okay, I think it's one of those things with all things social, it's almost like, let's come back to this in like 3 to 5 years and figure out, what was right, what we, or was our hypothesis correct or was it not? Because I think it can go either way so quickly, when it comes to social. We have all this great data when it comes to print and, whether or not students will pick up the phone, but I think just social, you're really just testing at this phase. And so, in my case, being in a small private institution in an intensely competitive environment, we just kind of go default aggressive. We're just going to try it. And then if we get yelled at, or if we're told that, students don't want to communicate that way, we'll certainly dial it back. But I think, it's certainly something that you can try. And again, I think it's going to be dependent on the student and how comfortable they are interacting online. And they're going to have, Jeremy, as you said, they're going to have students that just shut off and they just want that to be their place where they don't have parents and where they don't have school counselors and where they don't have coaches, watching their every move. And then you're going to have other students that, really treat it as a completely open and social network. And they'll be more than happy to engage there. So I think, again, it's just seeing kind of what works. I did want to talk a little bit more about a more traditional, yield activities, and that's kind of on-campus events. So Jay, I want to start with you and talk a little bit about the events that you host, and then are you seeing kind of a clear, differentiation between events in terms of, what's yielding at a higher rate for you and what maybe, are events that maybe you do because you've always done them, but they're just not as effective as others?
So for us, we really put all of our eggs in one basket. In the spring, we do a traditional accepted student day. Now, oddly enough, this event was unknown to the university prior to my arrival. They had planned it right when I got there, and we're really kind of testing the waters. And I've run with it ever since. And it's another way that the CRM really helped us, because we didn't have data on, what's supposed to happen, what we predict to happen, who's coming, how many, we were in Excel hell. It would take us almost a week to get everything figured out. And then once we were working with our CRM, our ability to, one, invite students to the event, two, communicate with them, acknowledge their registration, text and email them reminders to the event. When they were at the event, we were doing QR code check-in. So we had instant gratification with who's at the event, how many are there, kind of a running total. And then after the event, the ability to instantly acknowledge who was there, say thank you, but also anyone who registered and didn't show up, we were also able to say, hey, we missed you on Saturday, our next visit event is X. And we discovered, once we got down to crunching the number, almost 80% of our students who came to Accepted Student Day ultimately enrolled. So this was, hey, everybody, we're dropping our laundry and we're just going to have a bigger and better Accepted Student Day each and every year. And we've been doing that. We've been getting progressively more and more students there. Now, on a caution, some schools would go out and do multiple Accepted Student Days. We're not able to do that because in the collective bargaining arena that I operate in, I can't marshal my academic resources there for multiple weekends. So, we need to do it great. We need to do it once, and we need to make sure we hit all our options. So we used to actually do a separate honors brunch. I molded that into the day. So I do an early morning for my best and brightest, funnel that into the continuing, the welcome address, the meet with the dean, the meet with the faculty, the student and parent panels, the pitch selfies with the campus mascot, molding that into the day and making it educational, making it informative, but also trying to make it as fun as possible. And we've, just the yield on that compared to a traditional visit day or even our open house in the fall is everything pales in comparison.
I think the Accepted Student Day is a really interesting one to analyze because there's two schools of thought, and Jeremy and I were talking about this before the episode actually, and that's it. That is, you're doing it pre-May 1, so you want to get students, and this is really your last chance to get them to feel that this is the place for them, right? But what is the appropriate yield on an event like that? I mean, do you want to cast a wider net and try to get as many students there and get more of those undecided students that are still maybe considering 2 to 3 to 4 schools, but you're able to get them to your accepted student day, and obviously that'll go a long way. I think at a lot of institutions, what accepted student day turns into is this day for students that know they want to come there, but it's before May 1, and they just feel like they're obligated to come there with their families, and it's a big showcase. So I think there's really two schools of thought there. One of the things interesting on my campus is we actually have an event that the yield rate in terms of accepted to enrolled yield is actually higher than accepted student day, and that's our overnights events. And those happen about a month earlier than our accepted student day, and that's a day where a prospective accept gets paired up with a current student. We have activities, and they get to shadow that student and stay in an evening in our residence hall paired up with a current student. And the yield on that has been 80% plus for years, whereas our accepted student day yield is about 2/3 of the students ultimately enroll. So I just think it's an interesting strategy in terms of how you want to really recruit for those days and what type of student that you want to bring there. And Jeremy, I know you have some thoughts on this as well, so please jump in here.
Yeah, no, again, how you figure out what you're going to do to keep a student excited about your institution, if they've made a decision. Like, let's start with the group. I had down here 2 things I wanted to mention when we talked about this. When they go from the accepted stage, all right, to giving a deposit, we talked a lot today about connections and how do you do that and what should the conversation be like. Well, they still ultimately haven't made a decision until they deposit. And so I think the language and the way you communicate with them as an institution needs to be a little bit different versus once they've made a decision. I think then it becomes about reminding them all of the reasons why they chose your institution, why they should be excited, what they're going to see when they get on campus that fall. And as you and many of the other guests have talked about today, find ways to connect them within your current community and through these events. And back to your original point there, I just happened to, stumble upon something with a client the other week, and they're going to test it out and we'll see what happens. But they're going to do a lot smaller yield events this year, and they're going to do more of them. The challenge, as Jay talked about, is can you get the faculty to buy in? Can you get them to commit more time? And this school has, at least for 1 year, been able to get the commitment from them. So we'll see how it goes. But I would argue that if you can commit more individual time to a student and family on an event like that, whether it's talking about financial aid, classes, advising, whatever it is, I would argue that's going to go a super long way, obviously, into helping them prevent melt.
And, on back to the accepted student day, one of the things that we try to do in addition, and this is kind of referencing the Encora data that you spoke about earlier, is we really enforce the ROI. It's not just affordable institution, not just an institution, obviously you're excited about and you have a fit, but these are the results. This is the outcome. These are the students who've, the grad school placement. These are the students with the jobs. This is the starting salary. So we have all that data there, particularly for the parent who is probably the ultimate consumer, but really for the student to, what Jeremy said, to validate the fact that you're excited about the school, you've been accepted, you think you want to enroll, and let's make you feel good about the purchase you're thinking about making by showing you the ultimate outcome that you're going to receive by attending.
Yeah, no, I think it's a huge, if you're not talking about ROI when you're talking about your institution and ultimately the sell, which we'll get to, you're just missing the boat entirely. And so, Amber, knowing how important these events are for colleges, I think, based on what you said earlier, it's almost like we need someone, in an office at a computer during these events, monitoring what's happening on social media to make sure our event is running smoothly, right? We should be social listening during these large scale events. What if someone can't find a bathroom or one of our academic presentations isn't up to snuff? We should probably know that as we go so we can try to intervene. Or is that, again, getting into the weeds a little bit too much?
I think I imagine it would be helpful. We can definitely, social listening can deliver that. And there's two ways I think that social listening can help during events like that. I mean, one, if you're just starting out, it can kind of provide a baseline, so you can get an understanding of how your current events are currently performing, and what students are currently saying about that, and then leverage that research into planning for the next year. So whether or not they liked that speaker, or if they didn't, what you might want to change for the following event. And then I think you hit the nail right on the head about real-time feedback. So getting that feedback if people in aggregate, again, start complaining about, oh my God, I'm at this huge event at this huge university, I can't find the bathroom. Like that's kind of a big deal. People are going to leave with a bad taste in their mouth. So as much as you can, using social listening to identify unique challenges in terms of that experience that they're having on campus, and then turning around and being able to make immediate updates is super valuable.
Yeah.
And Adam, I would add one thing to what Amber said, which is, it's interesting, and she mentioned this at the start, how much students are willing to share through social. But it's unbelievable that, I think schools still do post-visit surveys or post-event surveys. And I've literally, been on a campus where, I'll stop a parent, explain who I am, what I'm doing on a campus, and I'll ask them specifically about this. And I've had parents verbatim tell me they won't say anything bad about an event or anything because they're worried somehow the dots will be connected, even though their name's not on it, and it's going to affect their child's ultimate, which again, it's irrational, but this is even how parents think. Yet that's why I think social listening is so powerful. And I love what Liz and Amber and everybody else are doing there, because ultimately that's where you're going to see right now the real and the raw. I don't want to say they're lying on those surveys, but quite honestly, I think we'd all agree that, generally those are all positive. And if they are, then where's the correlation with yield?
Yeah, there's nothing more skewed than a post-event admission survey. If you ever want to feel good about yourself, just do one of those. But that's all it's good for. It's not really productive. I think gathering information and what's being discussed online would be much more effective than a post-event survey. I wanted to talk a little bit, and this discussion has been amazing so far, so thank you so much. Before we run out of time, I want to talk about the cell. And cell has always been a dirty word in college admissions. I think it's a little bit more accepted these days, but still, people don't like to talk about what we do in that context. But it is certainly, there's a level of salesmanship that goes into what we do, and obviously yielding a student. So I want to talk a little bit about how you feel students deal with the idea that a college is going to sell them on their institution at some point. And then how do admission counselors know when the appropriate time is to make that pitch and to ask for that deposit or to ask for that registration event date? And Jeremy, let's start with you.
Yeah, I would just, say a couple of things. Obviously, the fun part for me is I get to see both sides of the, equation there. I get to talk to students and hear what they don't like about what colleges are doing. And then I get to talk to Adam and his staff, or Jay and his staff, and hear kind of the opposite side of, gosh, I wish students would do more of this, or I wish they'd stop doing this. Couple of things on that. What I hear from admissions counselors for the most part is, I have this huge group of names in my territory, however you want to break down, that for your institution. Where do I start? Do I pick name 1? Do I pick name 412? And if you don't have any predictive modeling, which obviously is becoming more common, but a lot of schools still don't have it, how do you demonstrate interest early in the process? Because this is where I think you have to start, obviously. We'll get to yield stuff in a second, but early in the process, how do you start developing that relationship that all of us know is important and ultimately will help not only deliver better customer service, but do yield? Well, I think part of it is establishing the admissions counselor from day one, as I mentioned earlier, as the go-to person for your institution. It doesn't mean Jay can't send something. It doesn't mean Adam can't send something. But what students tell us is, okay, if I get something that's actually cool from Jay or Adam and I like it, can I respond to it? Like, am I going to make Jay or Adam mad? And is that going to, again, kind of irrational, but that's in a lot of cases how they think. So I would guess that I would tell you guys being college admissions professionals, if you want to feel more comfortable about being able to ultimately ask for the sale, close, whatever you want to term it as, there's a lot of front end work, as I like to call it. If you're not going to set your admissions counselor up in terms of helping them develop the relationship early on, I think you're asking an awful lot for a 22, 23, 24, 25-year-old who may or may not have had, a lot of training to go in and start having conversations about, an expensive decision and a first real big decision, for a young person. So I think the biggest thing college admissions professionals need to realize, Adam, is closing is a process. That's the easiest way I can describe it. It is not a yield event. It is not a one-time they come to an event on your campus, an admitted student day. It's not a one phone call event because you finally got them on the phone, so you're just going to ask them because you've been so frustrated they haven't answered the phone before. It's a process, and I would argue at each stage, there's things I call little yeses. So it's verbal agreements that you can get from a student or a family that they still are interested in your institution and they want to learn more. And just quickly, here are a couple of those. If they respond to your email, that's a verbal indication that they're interested in your institution, because trust me, they're not responding to all these other emails that every school sends out. If they get back to you on text message, if they ask their parents a question, you ask them to ask their parents, they fill out the FAFSA, any of those things are them telling you, I'm very interested, tell me more, I want to learn more. And I would say, Adam, for an admissions counselor, once you get enough of those, and I can't tell you, there's no certain number, but once you get enough of those and you've had a conversation about cost, you've involved the parents, you've overcome, as I call them, objections or things that might, be on the student's mind as to why they wouldn't want to come to your school. The next step in the process is to simply ask them if they're ready to make a decision. And I don't think it will be pressure for the admissions counselor if they've done all of those things up to that point. But if the admissions counselor hasn't had consistent contact, or your institution's been, hit or miss with contact, it's going to be really hard, I think, for you to expect yeses a lot of the times when you have those conversations. And students tell us they realize it's a process. They know if they apply to 7 schools and they get admitted, they can't choose 7. They're going to choose 1. It's, are you making the process about them? Are you consistently trying to let them know, hey, I hope you come here, but you know what, if you don't, I want you to choose the school that's the best fit for you, and I want to help you with that decision. And I don't think that gets done enough early in the process, and admissions counselors try to make up late in the process all of that work that for whatever reason didn't happen. And I think in many cases, it's just, it's a tough sell at that point.
Yeah, I want to add to what Jeremy just said. And that's, we spoke earlier about this. It's building the relationship. If the counselor has built the relationship, it's not a hard ask. It's not a hard sell. It's continuing the conversation. And, if they have experience with the student and they have paid attention to those subtle yeses, then it's going to be easy. I always say that, a successful accepted student day is getting that line out the door in the admissions office with the checkbooks at the end of the day. You've closed the sale, so to speak, because you've provided them with the last pieces of information or just a feel-good experience. And it's easy because, you get into April, you're 2-3 weeks left to go. It's go time. You either know or you don't at that point. Let's ask.
Yeah, I think it's an art, right? I think it comes with experience. And like you said, Jeremy, I don't think you can have, a 22-year-old without a lot of admissions experience kind of thrown into a room with a student and their parents and make that ask and make it effectively. I think that comes with a certain level of training, with a certain level of experience, certain level of confidence, which I think sometimes we don't necessarily give our admission professionals all of the training and confidence that they need to do their job effectively. And that's something that we need to certainly keep an eye on as well. But then, I can't help but think that all of this stuff is trackable. We're talking about the little yeses. We're talking about social media engagement. We're talking about event attendance. And Jay, you've talked about your CRM and how you utilize that, a lot today. And if you can take all those little yeses and quantify those, take all those social media interactions and quantify those in your CRM, and then you're really going to talk about predictive analytics. If you know that a student that's interacting, monthly on social media with your handles has come to an accepted student day, has filed the FAFSA, and has spoken to an admission counselor via phone at least once yields at a 96% rate. Well, guess what? You're now building your strategy around making those things happen. And then you're getting to a point where you can make that ask and make that sell. So I think we're still not there yet. I think a lot of institutions are tracking a lot of this information, but they're not doing those nuanced, smaller interactions that sometimes we take for granted. Jay?
Yeah, I mean, you make a really good point there, Adam, and that's one of the things that's become a powerful tool for us within TargetX is, we'll see how many communications that students has received. We can click on it to see if they've responded. We've seen their email, their text message, but also on the same record, we'll see the events. We'll see if they've been invited, which they attend. Have they come a campus visit? Did they do open house? Did they do accepted student day? We developed, when we created enrollment services back in 2013, we added a position for an enrollment analyst. So we can pull in that data from the FAFSA information to look at the filers, to see, if we've requested information, financial aid, who's got it, what's happened along the way. So we're getting better. I think we're not at 100%, but we're so much more refined in our decision making and our action making now. And I say that, kind of tongue in cheek, but really for the counselor, and this is where it becomes overwhelming with the ask. When you get down to May 1, if a counselor is still dealing with 1,000 students and they won't know who to ask. But if through the data provided in the CRM, all of a sudden they're talking to maybe 100 or 150 students with leveraging data that's controlled in the CRM that they're keeping an eye on, it's going to make their action at that point pretty simple. I don't have to really talk to 1,000 students. I really have to focus on these 150. And I think that's really key. I do have to, one thing before I forget, I labeled the data as Encora data. It's EduVentures data from before. So I want to make sure I get that right.
Gotcha. And I think, I think what it all comes down to is we all need an Amber that's doing all the behind the scenes data analysis and all those type of things to kind of connect the dots for us. And that may be the piece that's missing. So we are out of time, guys. So I want to give you an opportunity each to have a final thought, and let's frame it with your professional lens. And where do you see this going in terms of, how colleges and universities should and will be interacting with accepted students in the future? And Amber, let's start with you.
I'm a broken record. So as I said before, I think social media is the future. The internet is the future. We talked a little bit about how it may not be feasible right now for institutions to kind of go full force into social media and have a strategy there, just because it's new, it's changing, it takes a lot of time. That being said, it makes sense to start laying the foundations. Make sure that your online presence is consistent with your brand. It's consistent throughout the different departments that you have on campus, that the right hand knows what the left hand is doing, sort of a thing, in terms of the content that you're producing in terms of the messages that you're sending out. And then specifically to what we've talked about today, the fact that kind of what Jeremy was talking about before in terms of the little yeses, start engaging with the students that already want to engage with you. It's just a really easy first step. If they're out there, if they're tweeting to your account, if they're interacting with you online, get back to them and start interacting with them on the channel that they've shown you they want to be interacted with.
Absolutely. And even if they don't tag you, you can still communicate with them. We already established that. We're at least going to try. Absolutely. Thank you, Amber. Jeremy, final thought.
Yeah, I think it's so important, and Amber touched on it. It's a foundation. It's a process, as I said earlier. This is not we wait until they're admitted, then we start communicating with them regularly. There are a lot of schools that verbatim still tell me that's what they do, and they know it's wrong, and they tell me that, and they're making changes. I just would really encourage colleges to consider much more consistency earlier on in their comms, and just consistency throughout, and using all the different mediums, because they're all valuable. It's all about what the student wants. And obviously, sure, there's a cost in some of those mediums, so that has to be taken into account on the admission side of things. But just the importance of, again, remembering it's a process. And then, Adam, I can't harp on it enough. Training, whether you do it in-house, you bring somebody like me to campus, just find a way to get your staff training on just a bunch of things, closing, talking about cost. And we do it in bits and pieces. For schools. And I know schools do it in bits and pieces for their staff, But to me, that's got to be a yearly, if not multiple times a year event. And it's starting to happen more, which is exciting for me. But I really think the ROI of investing in your team obviously is going to be huge in the long run. So,
absolutely, couldn't agree more. Jay, final thought.
My final thought is, I think although we've used a heck of a lot of, the text, the email, I think the key is the personalization. That can't be lost. When I first got into admissions 26 years ago, everything was face to face. We didn't have cell phones. There was no World Wide Web. You had to do all communication, meeting the student and the parent face to face at the school, at the college fair, and back on campus. So I think let's not forget that piece, but also in this age of email, text, and social media directly to the student, let's not forget the parents. I think the parents, particularly with Gen Z, are really big. The scary part is Gen Z parents are actually Gen Xers, and we're not trustworthy, and we're self-sufficient because we were the latchkey kid generation. So keeping us in the loop, I think, is going to be critical moving forward for universities to continue to thrive, because we're trying to be here. I liken it to the crowded arrivals hall at an airport. You need your voice to be heard and listened to above the din.
And I know everybody is thinking that Jay must have started in higher education when he was 8 years old. He's been around that long. Yeah, and we're the generation that likes 80s music. So, I mean, come on, we're cool as well.
Where's the Depeche Mode?
There you go. Guys, this has been incredible. I want to recommend everybody listening, check out the hashtag Higher Ed Live back channel. You guys have sparked a ton of really interesting discussion online over the last hour. So definitely check that out. Keep the conversation going. I can't thank you guys enough for coming on today. This has been fantastic. Definitely want to have you on again soon. And again, I think our listeners got a ton out of today's thing. And for everybody listening, best of luck out there in yield season. It's about to get crazy. Deposits will start rolling in. Hopefully you meet your numbers and are able to stay sane throughout the process. That's all we can ask for in this crazy world of college admissions in which we live. As always, I want to thank our sponsor, M. Stoner. You make us go. A big thank you also goes out to our program sponsor, NRCCUA. Until next time, I am Adam Castro, and this is Admissions Live. Take care.